A link to written instructions for this iSplice can be found at the end of this video. Today we're going to be putting an iSplice in the braided HiVee blue safety rope. We're going to be using a Samson Splice kit. I got this off of treestuff.com for $30 or so. It comes with 5 fids, a pusher, and I think that's all it comes with. I also picked up some awls. One of the darker one is a stitching awl, and the lighter one is just a regular awl. You can get those at Walmart for a couple of dollars. There's no need to spend $20, $30, or $50 on them when you can pick them up for $3 at Walmart. I also made my own wire fid because our half-inch fid that we're supposed to be using on this half-inch HiVee rope does not fit. It's too big because the rope is so tightly braided. So we have to use a wire fid, and I just happen to make my own. It's not difficult to do. All you got to do is use a little bit of wire, automotive wire that you can find in your local automotive store. I also used a casing from a rope that I picked up at Walmart. It's a real cheap rope, like $5 I believe. And I took the core out of it to use it as a, I guess you could name it a casing fid. I don't know. Get creative, whatever you want to call it. But basically what I done was I fed that casing, the cover, through the center using the wire fid. So I put the wire fid in first, and then I pulled the casing through, left a little bit hanging out, and then put the working end of my iSplice into the casing and pulled it through the core of the HiVee climbing rope. That's about how big my iSplice is going to be. What I'm doing right now is just explaining how to measure it. Unfortunately, when I made this video, it had music in the background, and when I tried to upload it to YouTube the first time, it didn't allow me to do it because all the songs on there were copyrighted or something of that nature. So, future reference, don't make videos with music in the background because it's a pain in the butt. So what I'm doing now, you need a felt tip marker and your fid to make your measurements. I'm going to be measuring 2 fid lengths from the end of my rope that I want to put the iSplice in. 2.5 fid lengths, my apologies. Once you get that 2.5 fids measured, you're going to make a mark on the rope, and then you're going to form your iSplice to get the correct size for the splice of your eye that you want to make. That's what I'm doing right now. You can't really see it that well, but that's what's happening. Once you get the size of the iSplice made, you just mark the opposite side of the rope and look at Roscoe. He just wants to be in the video. He's a camera whore. Now once you get mark B made, which is your iSplice size, you're going to measure another 2 fid lengths down. 2 fid lengths. And you're going to make another mark. This is going to be mark C. And then we're going to make mark D 1 fid length down from mark C. Mark D is where our casing is going to come out of itself. Now once you get your Mark D put on there, you want to take about 5 fid links, or I just pull the rope a few times and tie a slip knot to locking away from the end of the rope that you're working with. A quick recap, we're going to be using our 1/2 inch fid to measure 2.5 fid lengths from the end of the rope, make mark A. Make your eye splice the size that you want it and make mark B. From mark B, measure 2 fid lengths to make mark C, and then from C, you make 1 fid length and make mark D. Now what I'm doing right here is I'm counting the strand pairs. Starting from mark A, I'm going to count up towards the end of the rope 5 strand pairs, and then I'm going to mark it. I'm going to do this for a total of 5 times, and these markings on the strand pairs are going to tell me which strands I'm going to be pulling out later to taper the end of my rope. Now that I have all my strand pairs marked, I'm going to be going to mark C to start pulling the core out of the cover. Now when you start pulling this core out, it's going to come out as strands, so when you see the strands, don't be alarmed. You haven't unbraided the core or anything of that nature. This is just the way the rope is made. Now when you're pulling these strands out, it is quite difficult, so don't be afraid to put a little bit of muscle into it. Once you start to get the strands pulled out a good bit, you want to separate them where they separate them in the center and pull them apart so you can kind of open up that hole where you're pulling the core out, and so you can see down into the cover, and make sure you have all the strands before that hole closes up and you pull the tail end of the core out of the cover. They're in there pretty tight, so you're gonna have a fun time pulling them out. What I was doing is I would use the awl and stick them in the loop of the strands, and I would pry it out of there. You can kind of see how I'm doing it in the video. I apologize, it isn't a better video, but I just don't have the facility for that. And by no means can I call myself a professional eye splicer, but I do like to do these things on my own, so I know the science and methodology that goes behind these things, and I just really enjoy having the knowledge. So you can see there where I'm splitting them apart, and I'm looking down into the cover to make sure I've gotten all the strands, and I have. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the whole thing out. Once you get a good loop, it's pretty easy, but until you get that, it's a little bit difficult. Now what I done with the strands after I got them pulled out of the cover is I just tied a knot in them, because they kind of get in the way if you just leave them hanging out. So now that I have a knot tied in my my core strands. They're not really going to get in the way anymore. Our next step is moving back up to our Mark A, and the 5 strand pairs that we marked, we're going to start pulling those out. We want to start at the top, the very last strand pair that we marked, closest to the end of the tail, and start picking them out one by one. Now these strands are a little bit difficult to pull out as well until you get the first or the second. After the second strand, it gets a lot easier. You can usually pull them out without having to trace the strand up towards the end. But until you get at least one of them out, you're going to have a pretty hard time pulling them. You want to be careful not to pull these strands in the opposite direction, tightening up your core on the end that you're going to be splicing. It's important that we have this taper in our rope though, so we can actually get the cover to feed into the core of the rope. Because with this specific eye splice, the cover is going to become the core. Now, when you get these strands pulled out, you don't want to cut them off right away. A lot of videos you'll see them cutting the strands off. I wouldn't recommend it. Leave them long until you get to the point where you're feeding your cover into itself, where it's becoming the core of the rope. As I was saying before, I'm not a professional eye splicer, so whatever I'm showing you here on this video, it is purely just to show you the process. It is not to say that this specific splice is the best, or the way I'm doing it is the way you should do it. And I'm not saying that you should do it on your own at all. It would probably be good practice just to have a professional do it for you, if you're concerned with your ability in creating safety equipment for yourself at all. So where we're at now is I've gotten all the tapering strands, I've got them pulled out, and now I've stuck my awl into Mark D. That's our very last mark. And the reason I've done that is because I want to put my mark on the opposite side of the rope, so my taper end of the rope comes out on the opposite side that my core strands came out of. Now what I'm about to do is I'm going to feed the wire fid into the rope. You don't actually get to see me do it because it took so long and it's a difficult process, but once you do that, you're going to be feeding your wire fid from point B, or mark D. I'm sorry, I said B, but I meant D. You're going to be feeding your wire fid from Mark D up to Mark B, which formed our eye splice size. Now, once you get that fid all the way through, up coming out at Mark D, you're going to take your casing that you got, if you had got one, which I'd highly suggest. Take your casing and attach it to the fid. It doesn't take a lot. You just stick the end of it about an inch or so into the fid, and then you're going to pull it all the way through back out at Mark D. Now you can see here where I have a little bit of it sticking out towards my working end, but my tapered end. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be sticking my tapered end into the casing so I can pull it through the core of the rope a lot easier than it would be to feed it through with a fid. I tried this splice 2 times before this one, and I tried to do it with a fid and I could not get it through there. And that's where I came up with the idea of using a piece of wire to feed it through the core. And then later I found that they actually sell wire fids. Now you can see how I had put it in there. The casing really locks down onto the tapered end, so you don't have to worry about it coming out. Just make sure you don't stick that tapered end too far into the casing, or when it comes out at Mark D, you won't be able to get your whole casing out, and you'll have some of that casing left inside the core, and then your splice is no good. Now you can see there that I have the tapered end has come out at Mark D. It goes past Mark C, and then you have to wedge it past the core that's already in the rope and get it out past Mark D. So essentially what we're doing now is we're getting to a point where we want to start cutting our strands off. This is where you want to do it. As you're pulling that tapered end at point D, and you're pulling the cover into itself at point B, you want to start cutting the strands off as they enter point B. Okay. Now we've got it all fixed up. Now you want to make sure you get your eye splice made by pulling your tapered end. There's no other way to do it. You have to get your eye splice made by pulling your tapered end. You can't hook it up to a pole or an anchor point or anything. I tried and it didn't really work out too well. You just got to muscle it in there and get your points to marry up. Mark A and Mark B, you got to get them to marry up so your eye splice is made properly. Now what we're doing here is we have to milk out the core strands and the tapered end. We're going to be milking the rope to get the core strands to go back inside the rope and to get the tapered end inside the rope. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a mark where the tapered end meets the rope, where it's going into the rope. We'll make a mark there, and then on the core strands we're going to do the same. You can see here where I've made my mark where the tapered end is entering the core or the casing of the rope, and I've done the same thing. It's hard to see the mark because it's a blue rope or blue core strands, but it's there. Now after you get that mark made, you're going to pull your tapered end back out approximately a fid length, and you're going to do the same with your core strands. Pull it out a fid length from where you marked it to where the strands go into the casing should be a fid length. And once we do that, we have to taper each end so they don't make a big knot or bunch up in the center of the rope. So what you do, or what I done, was I started about midway and I cut one strand at a time and moving up about an inch each time. And that very last one I didn't cut at all. And I done the same thing with the tapered end. I cut it at the mark And once you cut it at your mark, you're going to unbraid it, and I believe there's 6 or 7 strands left in there. You're going to cut them off, starting about halfway and tapering it one strand at a time. And once you do that, you milk your rope back out, and so your core strands go back into the cover, and your tapered end goes back into the cover. Everything should feel nice and smooth. You shouldn't have any lumps. And now you have your iSplice. Please leave comments. Tell me what you think. Don't be too harsh. This is my first video.